A very good morning to you. I'm Howard Feldman. This is the Sunday Synthesis Podcast. It's Sunday, the 30th of May, 2021. It is a rather chilly morning here in Johannesburg. Winter is here, which also means all sorts of complications around COVID-19. As usual, Dr. Anton Meyberg will be joining us this morning, How are you?
Good morning. How are you? As you said, it's a very chilly morning in Joburg. Let's go straight for the numbers. There are currently 170 million cases worldwide, with 3.5 million deaths and 152 million cases resolved. The United States has 34 million cases with 609,000 deaths. India has 27.8 million cases with 325,000 deaths. And South Africa has 1,659,070 cases with 56,363 deaths. 4,515 new cases in the last 24 hours, of which 2,225 of those come from Gauteng, and 963,876 people having been vaccinated. The daily positivity test rate is 11.5%. That's a 7-day average. That means that out of every 100 tests performed, 11.4 people are positive. The numbers of people in hospital in Gauteng are 2,407, with 276 in ICU, and a staggering number of that, 230 of those 276 on ventilators.
All right, so let's just understand that positivity number, because we were told that, and you might have mentioned it, that once you get to 10%, that is classified as the next wave. The fact that it's now over 11%, is that now confirmed that we are in the third wave?
It's all semantics at the end of the day. Whether we're in the third wave, according to the academics or not, we are in the third wave. We're seeing it in the hospitals. The numbers are dramatically increasing. In my hospital, we've gone up to 4 wards now. In fact, very importantly, and I think this is an extremely important statement to make, people always talk about the numbers. What are the numbers? How many numbers are there? And the numbers aren't that important when you have to look at the bed occupancy in hospitals. And just this week, on Thursday night, we had multiple hospitals, including Linksfield, Olivedale, Mill Park, Sunning Hill, Morningside, Garden City, Bedford, Waterfall, and Brenthurst Clinic all being put onto divert. That means they did not have one ICU bed available for any critical COVID patients. This is where we are at. So whether or not we're in the third wave or not, which we actually are, we are in a critical stage at this moment, with the majority of cases coming from Gauteng, with people's behavior, with people not being responsible, with people having mass weddings and not taking care. The time is now to start taking that responsibility.
Well, actually, the time was before, but but that is what is past is past. We do need to be very aware of it. We seem to be living in a dual reality, because when you talk about the hospitals being full, when you talk about all of these hospitals on divert, I saw a notice somebody mentioned the other day that they battled to get a loved one into a hospital. This is the reality that you're dealing with, but in many other areas, it doesn't seem to be. It doesn't correlate, actually.
Look, you've got to understand we're in a very different situation to what we were in this time last year. This time last year, we were in a lockdown. People weren't transferring viruses and other things to each other. So the hospitals could just concentrate on SARS-CoV-2, on COVID-19. We've now got other patients in hospital that are sick with other things other than COVID as well. So half of your hospital is full with patients who are non-COVID patients. And you have to cater for those patients. You cannot close a hospital down and not cater for non-COVID patients at the same time.
Are most hospitals still doing elective surgery?
Most hospitals are still doing elective surgery. They're trying to keep that going as long as possible.
Okay, which is, of course, also different to last year. Last year, they kept stopping the elective surgery, starting it again.
They will be looking at stopping it when the numbers go higher. But right now, they're still able to do it. But it's getting to that sort of critical stage where they're going to have to decide which ones are the important cases to do now and which ones they can defer to a later stage.
I see that in terms of vaccinations, we're just under 1 million. How's this been playing out?
So from what the numbers are showing, you're looking at about 40 to 60,000 vaccinations a day, which is much better. There's a big improvement, but we can't pat ourselves on the back yet. We need to get those numbers up to 200, 300,000 a day for there to be a bit of a blunting in the actual vaccination schedule. I mean, yes, people are going to get vaccinated and we're hearing of more people, but the more people that get vaccinated, the better.
And lots of confusion also around where we are with that. People are getting their first Pfizers. We don't seem to be doing any Johnson & Johnson, even though 1.1 million doses were meant to come in sometime during May. Are we hearing anything at all about that?
We're not hearing anything about the Johnson & Johnson. It sounds like the Johnson & Johnson has gone stale or gone moot. It's just there haven't been any Johnson & Johnson administered in the last while since the end of the trial. What we do know is the Pfizer is being administered. The first dose of Pfizer has been given. The recommended date is 3 weeks up to 6 weeks, and they are looking at doing 6 weeks for the second dose, which is 42 days. There's no issue between whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks. It improves immunogenicity. It improves the adaptive response of your immunity. So the people who are getting the second Pfizer shot at 42 days are still safe to get it at that stage.
As long as they're getting it, I would imagine.
As long as they're getting it.
How much time do we have? 40 days to whatever that would be, where that benefit starts to decrease?
Look, it's a bit of a slippery slope. You don't want to push it too far after that 6 week period. But if you, for some reason, have to miss that 42 day, wherever you are down the line, still get your second dose of the Pfizer. What is also important to know, the first dose of the Pfizer and the second dose of the Pfizer are completely the same dose. It's not a changed formulation. It's not a change in the amount of vaccine that's given. It's exactly the same dose, the first one and the second one. And I think it's also important to note that if you have had COVID, you still need to get a vaccination, and you get one Pfizer vaccination, which is regarded as a booster to the antibodies that you've already got from having had COVID-19.
So if you've had COVID-19 and you have one Pfizer dose, you don't necessarily need the second one. Is that what you're saying?
You don't. I would say if you've had severe COVID, if you've been in hospital and you've had one Pfizer dose, you should be covered. If you had very mild COVID, I would probably still go for the 2 doses.
Right. What are you seeing in terms of breakthrough cases? Because a lot of people, a lot of medical professionals had the Johnson & Johnson. It's obviously too early to see how the Pfizer's behaving. But a lot of people have had the Johnson & Johnson. Are we seeing a lot of breakthrough cases?
So you've got to define what a lot is. A lot is 10%, 20%, 30%. We've seen a small amount of breakthrough cases. The majority of the breakthrough cases have not landed up in hospital, but have been ill at home with myalgia, with fever, with cough, but nowhere near to what they would have had if they had not have had the vaccination. Remember, the vaccination is not 100% foolproof. You can always have breakthroughs. And once again, it's the same with any vaccination, like your flu vaccination or a pneumococcal vaccination. You always can have a breakthrough because the effectivity is not 100% at any stage, whether it's the Pfizer, Moderna, or the Johnson & Johnson.
But in terms of hospital cases, would it be a very small percentage of people?
Very small percentage of the people that are being admitted having had the vaccination. But the important thing to note is that a lot of people get vaccinated and 2 or 3 days later, they then are COVID positive. And that's not because of the vaccination. That's because they had COVID 2 or 3 days before that and it's now brewing in their system. And you've got to actually make that differentiation between a breakthrough or someone who actually was asymptomatic or someone who was pre-symptomatic and developing COVID at that stage.
Right. And I also would like to just, I spoke with the Department of Health on Friday, and I think it's important to clarify how this algorithm works, the government algorithm. The way in which it works is there's no distinction or there's no differentiation between a person who's registers on their 60th birthday and somebody who's 197. You're in the same category. There's no distinction as well between comorbidities that people might have. The only thing that is relevant is that you are over 60 and that you in fact live in the urban area within 10 kilometers of a vaccine site. If you don't, and you put in your address that isn't within 10 kilometers of a vaccination site at this stage, then you will not be called until a site opens up near you. That distance is 30 kilometers in a rural area. So just be aware of that. And they do not seem to be encouraging walk-ins at this stage, although we're hearing very, very mixed reports by some people who are over 60 that have managed to get it. I think it does depend on the actual site.
Look, I think it's done very, very badly. Okay. I think that what we always said from the beginning was that people should have been given a scoring tier. If you're over the age of 60, if you've got certain amount of comorbidities, per age, per your chronic condition, you should have been putting on a scoring ratio or a tier, and those people would have been the first people to get the vaccination regarding what their requirements were and regarding their comorbidities. This way, it's a kind of anarchy, and anyone can go and get it before somebody else. You'll find a 60-year-old who's absolutely healthy getting it before an 85-year-old with emphysema and diabetes. And that's the problem with this whole system.
Yeah, it is. The other comment that he made, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is when they do get these Johnson & Johnsons, hopefully it'll be soon, they will be allocated to specific sites. In other words, they don't want to mix up which vaccinations are at which site. And the other part of that is that you will not have an option which vaccine you get. In other words, if you called to site A and that's a Johnson & Johnson site, that's the vaccine that you're getting. What's your response or your thoughts around that?
100% okay. We've always said you take what you can get from these vaccinations, as Dr. Anton Meyberg says. Whichever one you get, you take it, you run, and you take it. It's there. They all work. We know that they work. They're all effective. Take either Johnson & Johnson or the Pfizer, but take what you can get and make sure you get it.
A lot of people have asked me the question around the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine. How immune or what kind of protection do you have and from when? We know the Johnson & Johnson, because it's 1 day, you've told us it starts at 2 weeks, decent immunity building up to 28 days where it's very, where you are covered. How does it work with the Pfizer single dose?
So it's a very similar type of mechanism of action. Within 2 weeks, you start developing some sort of immunity, maybe a 20% or 30% immunity, and up to 3 weeks to 8 weeks later, after the second dose, you actually develop a far greater adaptive immunity and a far greater immunity that your body can actually fight against this virus. That being said, a lot of people overseas in the United States, for instance, only have had one of the Pfizer vaccines and aren't getting the second one for multiple reasons. That just means that they're not going to be having the immunity for a longer period than other people who have both vaccinations would have.
Oh, okay. So it's not about the level, it's about the longevity of it. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. And a number of people asking about a possible booster if you've had the Johnson & Johnson. Well, I think that's contentious.
Look, it's a very contentious issue. Okay. The point is that, and I said this last week, I believe if you're a healthcare worker on the front line and you've had the Johnson & Johnson, 3 months or so later, you should have a booster, whatever that may be, in order to protect yourself. Remember, we've still got the whole country to vaccinate, so you've got to prioritize it, and I think you should prioritize your frontline workers. But I think down the line, if you've had one Johnson & Johnson, we are going to need boosters. And in many countries over the world, they're looking at actually doing a third booster for people who've had the second Pfizer because of the different variants available.
Is the Johnson & Johnson well accepted around the world?
So it is accepted around the world where it's been rolled out. That's the point. If it hasn't been rolled out in the country, if you go to a country like Israel, where only the Pfizer has been rolled out, then obviously only the Pfizer is accepted. But if you go to countries in Europe or America where it has been rolled out, it is well accepted.
Is it like it's that old VHS beta debate, isn't it?
It's Betamax, yeah.
The Betamax VHS. Which one are you going to go with? Which one? Quite crazy. How are we doing in terms of variants here? What are you seeing? A lot of people asking if this variant or if the third wave seems to be a new variant, because we're hearing a lot more cases in terms of children, and we're going to lead on to that as a discussion as well.
Look, I think when I said this morning that we've got 276 in ICU with 230 ventilated, that tells you how we're doing. The majority of people in ICU are landing up being ventilated. That's a big number. And it shows you how critically ill and how critically sick these people are in ICU. With regards to the variant, we still are dominant with the South African variant. We are seeing a few UK variants and a few Indian variants, which are highly transmissible. But our biggest issue now is the South African variant, which is sort of running wild in this country.
But it's the same variant that we saw during the second wave. Is that right?
For now. We're still waiting for genomic testing at a later stage. Once we start peaking more, they'll do more testing and we'll get further answers, but it appears to be the same one.
Right, but you're on the front line. Very quickly during the second wave, no matter what the results were telling us, you told us on this podcast, and you told me that it was very clear that this was a new variant, even though the academics weren't picking it up yet.
Right,
what you're saying to me now is that it appears to be the same, that in terms of behavior around the...
We don't think we have a super variant. We don't think it's the predominant UK or Indian variant, or even this new variant coming in from Vietnam. We do think it's South African. Yeah.
Yes, I panicked when I saw that. Just tell me about this Vietnamese...
So that's a new, highly contagious variant that actually contains a hybrid or a mixture of the UK and the Indian variant. We're going to see this over the next couple of months with new variants developing. We'll have to wait and see how people react to it. All I know is the one thing it's going to promote is severe fatigue with people, with patients, with medical staff.
Yeah, that we know. It seems to be more airborne, this one, or from what I saw in a very scary headline.
I'm not convinced about that. I think it's more highly transmissible and more contagious.
Right. Let's talk about schools, because so many of the questions today, and as you've seen, what I've tried to do is answer a lot of the questions without going through the specifics of the question. We will see if we need to still go and look at some specifics. But a lot of people are very concerned from play school, nursery, primary, high school, the way their schools are managing it. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety, which is what I'm picking up from so many of the questions that we've been sent this morning.
Yeah, look, this is a very contentious issue and a very difficult issue. I think we've said from the beginning that our priority is to keep the schools open as long as it's safe. When it's deemed unsafe, we will close the schools. We have to put the children's emotional and mental aspects obviously at the top of the priority list. But when we note that there's inter-school or inter-class transmission, at that stage, it's time to decide to either close the class or the grade down or do something further. And just from our side, we have high-level meetings multiple times a week. Today, we've got 2 high-level school meetings to decide what we are going to do in the next few days with certain classes, with certain schools, with the response to this. You know, if we look at the solid numbers, just from yesterday, there are 21 new cases just from one day. Of those 21 cases, 7 of them are children below the age of 18. That's a big number, and that's a worrying number. And we've got to be very careful, and we've got to take that into regard when we decide whether or not we are closing classrooms or closing schools down, because that plays a big part in our decision. So I understand the anxiety of parents. Being a parent myself, we're also anxious to send our children to school, but we know at this point in time, where my kids are, it's safe. I can't tell you what's going to happen in 2 or 3 days. And that's why on a daily basis, the schools are in contact with the medical professionals. They're in contact with other schools, and everyone's trying to decide what is best for that classroom, what's best for that school for the coming few days. We are trying to mitigate that we do everything correctly and everything is done on the right sort of front so we can prevent inter-school transmission and we can keep everybody safe and healthy.
And I guess that's the balance is the priority of keeping schools open. Well, when does the priority shift to say, you know, now it's really about keeping the kids safe, which obviously it always has been, but it's a very, very, very difficult balance to achieve.
It's a fine line, and I think the important part is also to say that is not only the school's responsibility; it's the parents' responsibility to make sure that after school, the kids aren't involved in social arrangements. The kids aren't having sleepovers. The kids aren't going to huge functions. The kids are wearing masks. The kids are following the rules. It's the parental responsibility to make sure that happens so we can try and prevent inter-school transmission.
Right. And are we seeing the same type of outbreaks or incidents across all schools?
No. So certain schools have got, for some reason, a higher percentage of people having been affected. And up until now, those schools haven't had major inter-school transmission. That changes obviously on a daily basis. And today we're going to review certain schools that are having what we do deem is to be inter-school transmission, and then we'll make decisions further. We need to, as I say, keep the priority and the safety of our children and our teachers at the forefront of our decisions.
And I think what is important because I've certainly received a tremendous amount of negativity around schools, communication, etc. I do see a lot of anxiety that just underlines all of those concerns and questions. The schools really are trying, and I know from you how often you're meeting with the schools and meeting with the various educational facilities to try and get this right, because it is a very, very difficult one. And I think some of the concern at the moment is also actually coming from teachers, where they're saying they don't know when they're getting the vaccine because they're generally under 60. They're exposed almost every single day to some kind of, some kind of a situation. And yet on the other hand, is they obviously prefer to be teaching in person, not behind a screen.
Yeah, look, I must say, even with schools and that, it all boils down to honesty. Honesty of parents, honesty of children, honesty of testing. There's a whole screening protocol you have before school where we do temperatures and they fill in protocol forms. If you're going to lie and say that your child is well, but your child has been coughing or your child has had a runny nose and sent him to school, well, that defeats the whole purpose. We're trying to protect everybody. We're trying to keep this going as long as possible. So we all have to work together on this to maintain this and make sure that honesty is the policy we follow here as we're keeping an honor code.
You've referred to that a lot. Does that mean that this is something that you've seen a lot, that people...
And unfortunately, we're seeing it a lot, that people, people aren't doing what they should be doing. People are scared that their children are going to miss school and they think it's only just a sniffle or only just a cough. If your child is sniffling, if your child is coughing, if your child has a fever, keep them away from school. Test them if needs to be tested. Speak to your general practitioner, speak to your specialist, speak to whoever you need to speak to, but don't make the decision on your own to say, I'm going to send my kid to school. Rather discuss with the medical practitioner first and make that decision as a sort of a group.
Do you think it's likely or possible that some schools will land up closing for a few weeks or so in the next couple of weeks?
I do think either some grades are going to close or some classes are going to close, and that's a reality. And if they close for 2 weeks or they close for longer, that is the reality. That's what needs to be done, but it will only be done if it is deemed necessary, if there's no other way. And once again, the children's safety and the teacher's safety are at the forefront of our decisions in these decision-making processes.
What about places of worship?
So from what I've seen at places of worship, they are still doing things very well. They are keeping the numbers low. Some places are still praying outside. They're socially distancing. They're wearing masks. If they can maintain that and do things like that properly and keep the services short and get people out there quickly, they can still maintain and carry that on.
Right. How far into this third wave do you think we are? How long do you think this has to run until we start seeing a little bit of an improvement?
Well, we're not at our peak yet. I still believe we're only at about 4,500. We're going to go up to 5,000. The numbers are going to go upwards dramatically still. So we've still got a few weeks in this process before we can actually say that we are going to be sort of going on a downward spiral.
How are you managing?
It's been a rough ride. It's been a long, rough ride, but we take it day by day as it comes.
All right. Fine. I feel like you avoided that answer, but the avoidance of the answer is the answer, I would say. Is there good news?
So, there's always good news. One has to discuss these things. And I think, the good news speaks for itself.
It does,
Liverpool are through to the UEFA Cup, far exceeding our expectations. We didn't have a great season, we know that, but yet we still finished third in the log. So go you Reds. As for the other Red teams, a goal is just a goal unless your goalkeeper scores it or they don't. And to quote, tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. Be safe, look after yourselves. We have got a moral, social responsibility to do things properly now to avoid actually making this virus go out of containment. We have to look after each other. We have to keep our hospitals under containment. We have to follow the rules. Have a good week.
So no one would ever have accused Dr. Anton Meyberg, or me for that matter, of being possessed with any tact, but that's all right. That's not what we are here for. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. You'll see the subscribe button below. This has been the Synthesis Sunday podcast with me, Howard Feldman. We come to you every week with this information. Later on this week as well, in fact, I will be chatting to Discovery, and we'll be trying to get a sense of where they stand and their approach and strategy to the vaccine rollout. I'm Howard Feldman. This is your Sunday Synthesis podcast. Be safe, be warm, and God bless.